Okay, we are recording. Finally back. I feel like it's been some time, but we're back here. Me, the one and only Mshary, and Haider. This is a topic that you guys have voted on actually on Twitter. So we made a poll of 4 options, and one of them, which is the one that we're going to talk about, is emotions and rationality. That's a topic that's been voted on. So it's going to be fun to talk about.
It was a landslide victory, right? I think 78%.
Yeah, it was a big one. Yeah, it was a big one. Most people voted on it. Was not a close match. It was an abomination. It was just destroyed.
Yeah.
All right, so emotions and rationality. The first thing I want to bring up here is how that's been phrased, emotions and rationality, as if they're opposites. But the opposite of rationality is irrationality, kind of by definition. But there is some truth in that emotions and rationality are opposites. There's some truth to that. And that's kind of the point of this topic. Okay, Haider, so I want to start off by asking you, can you kind of talk about your understanding of the contrast between emotions and rationality? Why are they contrasted?
Okay, so there's been a long philosophical debate about the two topics. Like, do we follow our instincts, our emotions, our feelings, however you want to phrase it, or should we go by what our minds say? And I believe the distinction between the two, or relying on one as though it's in conflict with the other, because that's typically the way it's framed. Do you follow your mind or do you follow your heart? But I believe that the two can be aligned. And in fact, each emotion has underlying reasons to it. So it's not thinking or feeling, it's that every feeling also has a thought associated to it. And every feeling has like concerns or let's say like a perspective related to it. To give you an example, if you feel angry, the anger is a result of some way of interpreting a situation and considering it, let's say, a threat. So then it's as though the feeling is trying to get you to act in a certain way in order to protect you. But sometimes the threat is actually just a perceived threat, and it's not as dangerous as, like, the way I think of it is each feeling is a person, and each person has an opinion. That's how I think of feelings. But to go purely rational, I consider that irrational, because you have to listen to your emotions, and then you also have to pick the options that make you feel better. So emotions definitely come into the equation of decision making. We can't separate the two. What we can do is we can explore the pros and cons, what are the consequences of the decisions we want to make, what are the feelings, each feeling telling us, in order to have a more informed decision, and one that doesn't have there's a nice principle in the book Principles by Ray Dalio, where he talks about a first order effect and second order effect, or second order consequence. So typically the things that we want to do have first order positive effect, like eating chocolate, for example. It makes you instantly it's enjoyable instantly. But the second order effect is negative if we don't take care of our health. Most positive things usually have, like, in the first order, it's not that exciting, but in the second order, the long-term consequences, they may be positive ones. So we have to take both into considerations and not to be impulsive in the sense of not thinking too long term ahead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think you put it really well. So I want to quote you. It's not a direct literal quote, paraphrase, but something you said in our last discussion, and I really like how you put it. You said how emotions have opinions. How every emotion has an opinion, which is in a way the same as what you just said, which is every emotion is like a person, like a very, very simple person. And they have their views, they have their like perspective on reality, and um, then you also said just now how you want to have you want to make an informed decision. So the information that you're getting here is when you're trying to be rational, is emotions tell you things about the world. They tell you how something hits you, your relationship with something, whether you feel fear or anger tells you something about your relationship with the source. Um, Different feelings you get, different emotions you get, they tell you more information about the world around you. And so ideally, a rational person would pay attention to those feelings and what the emotions tell them, but not like succumb to the pressure of the emotion. So if you feel the pressure of, let's say if you feel the pressure of fear, okay, or let's say you feel the pressure of anger, and if you can't, let's say, keep yourself at a distance and kind of detached from the anger, and kind of bear the pressure of the anger, then the anger kind of consumes you, and you get kind of sucked into the experience of the anger, the feeling of the anger, and you end up doing what the anger tells you to do, which is to say mean things and say hurtful things and maybe throw things around and break stuff around you. That's an irrational type of behavior, because you're not listening to the other sides of you. You're not listening to the other parts of you that tell you different things. Anger tells you to break things, but another part of you says, don't break this. I want to use it tomorrow. I like my phone. I want to play games in 20 minutes. And so a rational person would take all of those into account without like getting too pressured by any one of them to behave a certain way. And that's kind of where the mind, the higher self, comes into the picture. The elegant human, rather than the animal, comes into the picture, because this person can withstand the pressures of the emotions and the feelings and external circumstances, and instead make like a more complete, a more well-rounded decision that benefits the most of you, not just you now, but also you in 20 minutes, and you in 20 days, and you in 20 years. So I don't see the emotions and rationality as this or that. I don't see it as rational or irrational. I see it more like a spectrum, because it's more about how much are you taking into account before you make the decision you're making. The more you take into account, the more, like, say, voices or sides or opinions you take into account, the more rational your decision becomes.
Yeah, I like your expression of the more of you, like now you in 20 minutes. That's a nice way of putting it. So as you were talking, what came to mind is an expression I heard a long time ago, but it's stuck with me since. I'm talking about maybe 10, 11 years ago.
Oh.
And the expression is, do you want to be, or it's a question really, do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? And the reason why that's so interesting is that with any negative emotion, we can't dismiss it, because there is some truth to it. So when you get angry, when somebody speaks to you in a disrespectful way, there is reason, or you get into an argument and what you're saying is right, you know? So we double down, like we want to prove that we're right. and sometimes that takes us into a negative path. And so the question is, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because it doesn't mean that you're no longer right when you choose to be happy, but that sometimes you need to pick your battles and to decide whether something is worth it or not. Especially when you get into arguments, like the example the person had given was that he hadn't spoken to his father in many years because of a disagreement. So the question was like, do you want to be right and stick to your convictions, or do you want to be happy and mend ways with your father? You know.
Yeah.
So again, like with any emotion, it is an opinion that's associated with it, and there is likelihood to be a strong element of truth. Your anger, your frustration, your anxiety. There are certain things to take into account, but then you don't want them dominating your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So while you were talking, something kind of popped in my head. So, and like I want to hear what you think about this. So, when you said the phrase or expression or question, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? The other phrase that's similar that's been in my head sort of is, do you want to be right or do you want to do what's right? I noticed someone in my life that I really respect and admire, in my eyes, has been doing the right thing, but I have been so focused on proving myself right. So so I started to question in my head, and just in the back of my head, why does one want to prove themselves right? Like, what does that even mean? What does that do if you prove yourself right? And so it just popped in my head that maybe, let's say I get angry, and part of anger, if I'm angry at someone, I judge this person to be wrong or that this person needs to change or needs to be fixed in some way, and that part of reality is what's triggering and justifying my anger. So that, what puts me in a place where I want to prove myself right, which is also to prove to others to justify to others my anger, to tell them that my anger is righteous. There's nothing wrong with it. I shouldn't make it go away. It's what should happen. And so to prove to them that I'm right about this person being broken and that they need to be fixed up. And so I'm thinking here, which is the part I want to get your input on, is my hypothesis is that I'm jumping around this point, so I'm just going to say it. I would want to prove myself right because I can't bear the pressure of the anger and then step away from the anger. Instead, I get sucked into it and I try to prove to others that the anger is true, to kind of escape trying to bear the pressure of the anger. Does that make sense? To avoid bearing the pressure of the anger, I try to justify the anger.
Yeah, so you come up with like a rationalization that makes anger convincing, maybe to yourself, but especially to others. So they can say, okay, you have every right to be angry.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's looking like this boils down to the fact that it's not that I hate this person or something like that. It just boils down simply to the fact that I cannot bear the pressure. I cannot bear this anger. And so that leads me to try to prove myself right with the anger. What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And also, I think the reason why in general we want to prove ourselves right is because we also want to have confidence in our ability to understand the world. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we doubt our own thinking or our feeling, because then it causes doubt and like inner conflict, which may not, that alone may not be comfortable. Which is why my impression of human beings in general is that we value certainty more than we value truth. So I want to feel confident in an opinion, even if it's wrong. And we see this pattern play out a lot. Sometimes it's actually an inability to look beyond a conviction. You know, it's not a choice that we're valuing our opinion over other other options or other perspectives. It's that we're unable to see the other perspective. And I see this a lot with political discussions. I think people are genuinely sucked into a certain point of view. They can't think of a good person as being a bad person. Like they trust them way too much. The possibility of them being bad doesn't exist. And the same with someone they consider a bad person. There's no way they can be a good person. And so that interpretation makes it really, it blinds them from all other possibilities. And it's not that they want to stick to their opinion. It's not that they want to prove their belief right. It's that they can't see it any other way. I think that's a possibility. The other thing about rationalization, like it was a realization for me that there is a distinction between rationality and rationalization, because I spent a good chunk of my life rationalizing existing beliefs. And then when I discovered, like, I felt like my mind played a trick on me. Like, hold on, I thought I was doing this. It ended up I'm doing this. So I actually wrote an article about this. It's called Rationality and His Evil Twin. Because of this, like the need to make that important distinction, and which is rationalization is about starting from a conclusion that you want to support, and then you look for supporting evidence. Whereas rationality, you begin from the evidence, you acknowledge what the evidence is, what like limitations there are with the evidence if you've applied like a selection process, and then seeing where the evidence leads you in terms of the conclusion. And I think that's like a realization or a point to keep in mind as we're trying to understand our beliefs, our emotions, the world we inhabit, whatever it may be. We need to be aware of the possibility that we're rationalizing instead of actually being rational.
Mm-hmm. So I realize now that we've very, very quickly put the discussion to bed of emotions and rationality. We almost immediately clearly described what it is, identified the boundaries. So
it's hard. Yeah, it's hard for us to see the separation between the two. Like I think we've reached the stage where we know they come together, and it's not like we don't dismiss emotions. We see it as part of the thinking process.
Yeah. So الحين يعني, so I would like to so this is something that we clearly understand. It's like it's pretty clear. Like we understand it, at least intellectually, يعني, in this discussion, what rationality is and like how to do it, right?
Yeah.
But this is not something that people just now started to learn about. This has been like a human struggle for thousands of years, right? It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing. But then I would like to point out here, or like point to and try to address what's with the struggle. Why is it taking thousands of years and we're still not done with this struggle of rationality? What's so hard about making rational choices and rational decisions? What kind of puts us down, like takes us down to irrationality and like uncontrolled emotions, and so on. Why do you think?
So I think the distinction is very similar to why we can give other people amazing advice, and then it's super hard to follow it ourselves. Because it's one thing to know emotions, and it's completely different experiencing those emotions. So when you're angry, it's really hard to tell yourself, by the way, there's no need to be angry. I understand, but there's no need to be angry. Like removing yourself from that experience is insanely hard. So I think that that's partly to do with it, and then just like applying it to different situations. So for me personally, I think I've come to a good place when it comes to emotions and being triggered. So when I see someone insult, let's say, insult Kuwait, my religion, my beliefs, whatever it may be, I feel like they're uh, like they don't really deserve my attention, because some people say crappy things all the time. You know, like I just don't give them I don't focus on what they have to say. There are so many other people saying amazing, useful things, you know, or saying positive things. And I feel like within Kuwait, especially, given what I'm experiencing, a lot of people develop racist attitudes or xenophobic attitudes by focusing on the bad people within any community. So they say, oh, look at the expat who did this, who said that, and they overlook the thousands and thousands of really good expats, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes there's this sort of public hype. You feel like you need to belong, or you need to protect your social identity. You need to protect your pride, and so again, the rationalization kicks in. You feel like I need a certain outcome, or I feel justified because of this. And I do believe so. I believe there's a struggle with the application, but also not everyone knows about critical thinking, cognitive biases, logical fallacies. These things are not as common as we think them to be. So like a lot of the majority of the population, I would say, is not that acquainted with critical thinking.
Interesting. That's a really good point. I keep forgetting that not everybody spends their life meditating and reading books about all these things. Interesting.
And it's not even in the education system.
Wow, you're
critical
right.
thinking.
You're right. That's scary. It should be in the it's really foundational and important, these core skills.
Yeah, when I was in Britain, they were going to introduce it in high school, and I remember like a teacher gave us a snippet about it. It was a really nice curriculum. They were about to introduce it, and like some of the exercises that it included would be reading a passage, and then you're given questions on what kind of conclusions can you draw from the passage itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like applied critical thinking. And he said, our teacher said, if this gets introduced, this would be the most significant subject in all of schooling, because
Mm-hmm.
it's so important, like to protect yourself from being manipulated, you know?
Yeah.
But from what I know, it didn't get introduced. I don't know the reason why. But again, like I left the UK, so I don't know what actually happened, what change in the curriculum took place. But yeah, like it's so important, but it's routinely being neglected.
Wow. That's yeah. Okay. All right.
I actually know a professor at a university
Mm-hmm.
in Kuwait who introduced a critical thinking course, and some people were against it, like they were adamantly against it, because they're saying, no, this is philosophy and it goes against Islam and like
Really?
whatever. Yeah.
Okay. This is sad to hear. This is bad news.
Indeed.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned the part of emotions and how especially, like you understand, not to succumb to anger, blah, 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 blah. But when you get angry, you kind of forget all that. It's hard to notice it in the moment when it happens. The experience is different than understanding the experience. So that seemed to me that people don't realize when they're losing their rationality or their, let's say, rational awareness from a detached perspective. And that when emotions come, they don't question the emotion. They just do what the emotion says without thinking independently of the emotion. So it seems like it's an awareness problem. It's a self-awareness problem, right?
Yeah, and also I think it's maturity in how we deal with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
like instead of, and by the way, like you know how like the way I think about emotions is that I tend to think of them as individuals, but even the way we deal with other people, let's say children, sometimes we succumb to the requests of children because we don't want to get into like a long debate. Yeah, to experience relief as a parent, I don't want to discuss something again and again, so I give in to my children. But that's not always a positive thing, and sometimes it doesn't develop the maturity in them when it comes to being patient about something. So let's say if we've spent too much on toys this month, the mature thing would be to say, okay, we'll wait till next month.
Mm-hmm.
And succumbing to every impulse may develop like an immature and an impulse that may result in negative consequences in the future. So they might resort to, let's say, retail shopping, like when they feel bad, they want to buy something for themselves, or not being able to budget their money well because they've not developed the maturity in how they deal with their emotions. So that's something for us to acknowledge and work on, and not to expect that we'll get everything right from the get-go. Like it's like you said, being self-aware, paying attention, but then also to work on cultivating those impulses so that there's an expression by Aristotle. I forgot the exact expression, but he says it's one thing to get angry, but it's another thing to get angry for the right reason, to the right degree, towards the right person,
Oh, yeah.
So that's what we want. We don't want to dismiss our emotions. We just want them to to experience them to the right degree, and to like leading. It's as if the emotions are supporting us in responding in the best way. Mm-hmm. So if you are physically under attack, you do want to get angry so you can, either defend yourself or like have enough adrenaline to run.
Yeah.
But so that's about emotions to the right degree.
So so in my personal life, in my personal development, every once in a while I reflect on what is maturity really, because I don't see where it fits in my life, and it doesn't seem like I need it. But then I eventually started to realize that maturity is it's not one single thing. Like awareness is just one single thing. Maturity is a collection of things like skills and judgments and certain decisions you make. So yeah, it's absolutely about maturity, and a part of me starting to think that the spiritual path, like meditation, reflection, journaling, self-awareness, and just awareness broadly, it is actually a path towards maturity. It's not really, I don't think it's really anything else. It is a path towards maturity.
Yeah, but I think there's a misconception about maturity.
Mhm.
Actually, I noticed this about reality. I'll talk about reality in a bit. But maturity is usually, um, the way it's framed is um, doing what is expected of you by society. You know, so
Yeah,
it's conditioning towards what is socially acceptable. But I
yeah.
don't think that's the case. So I think it's uh, developing the skills or developing the attitude, the approach that allows you to handle situations in the best way possible. Okay, and it could be for your own well-being, but also the consequences others may experience.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
okay, now switching to reality. I was in a discussion a few weeks ago, and we were discussing uh, leaders. It's part of a group called the Intellect, and the salon, like the discussion, was about leaders with mental illness. Okay,
Oh, okay.
so we were discussing the topic, and Steve Jobs came to the discussion about like specifically the point of the reality distortion field. You know
Mhm.
that how he had a certain opinion, he had a certain perspective. Everyone thought it made zero sense or it can't be done. He insisted on it, and then the engineering team would get it done. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so it's called reality distortion field. One of his a member of his team came up with the expression because she was so frustrated by the way he
Mhm.
assumes reality bends to his will, and so she's like, no, yani, don't think this. But time and time again, Steve Jobs did manage to prove it. But I think the expression itself uh, confused reality with what people think is reality. So, for
Ooh.
example, um, Elon Musk, when he wanted to start SpaceX, he was exploring some of the projects, like he was discussing it, um, discussing the project with actual rocket scientists, and he was new to the field. And he would ask them, is it possible to take a rocket into space and then bring it back or like land it safely again? They're like, it can't be done. And he insisted on his opinion. And they're like, you're crazy. It's not, this cannot be done. But then Elon Musk proved that it can be done, you know?
Mhm.
So the resistance that he was experiencing was not in what reality is. He didn't challenge reality. He challenged what people thought reality was.
Mhm.
So the same with Steve Jobs. He didn't bend or distort reality. He was challenging the way reality was distorted by those who think they were experts or those who are experts in what we tried before, not what is possible in reality, you know?
Yeah.
So the same thing with maturity. There's an element of you wanting to develop your skills so you can interact with reality in a good way, or conditioning yourself to be to mesh in society and conform to social expectations, which is not what I think maturity is about.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's the common misconception of maturity. And this is the impression that I don't know about everybody else, but I think most people are taught when they're young is that this is what it means to be an adult. You do what people tell you, you do the thing everybody else does, and you wait until you die. That's
Yes.
basically maturity.
Yes. Actually, I've been thinking about this specific topic for the past couple of weeks. I'm working on a course on emotions, like how we should deal with our emotions. Uh, and I realized that even the way we think about reason, the word aql in Arabic, it means to hold or like to restrain. Okay, so it's as if aql, reason, is to restrain the emotions. And I do believe when it comes to adulting or when it comes to emotions, we think of inhibition. Like, this is not something you should be doing, so you stop yourself from doing. But then this leads to all sorts of uh, all sorts of troubles in terms of how we relate to other people, the extent to which we can be honest with others, the extent to which we can live an authentic life based on our values. Because if we inhibit, uh, uh, we're not giving ourselves the freedom to express ourselves and to understand ourselves, and then to live by our own values.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, you wouldn't want to inhibit your emotions. Instead, the healthy and mature thing is to instead just let yourself feel the emotion, just not react, just not do what it tells you to do necessarily. You decide independently of the emotion of what you want to do. So lately in my life, I've been kind of there's like this small corner of maturity I've completely neglected, I think, in my entire life. And I don't know if I was taught to cultivate it or taught to neglect it. I'm not really sure. But either way, I didn't have this skill or traits, let's say. So I realized I am extremely impatient. And I mean extremely impatient. I take it to the farthest extreme you can imagine. And just and just by being patient with my desires and my needs also, it's made a big impact towards allowing me to not react to my emotions. So when I get an emotion or some kind of feeling, I get extremely impatient about resolving it, and I want to resolve it right now. And when that happens, of course, the only thing in my mind is to resolve this feeling, whatever it may mean, insecurity, whatever. And so because of that, I don't pay attention to anything else at all, because I need to resolve it, and I need to resolve it right this moment, not even the second, like right now. And so by just remembering, just remembering patience is a thing, which is to wait, and it doesn't mean to make the need go away now. It means the need doesn't get fulfilled, the desire doesn't get met, or the opposite, need doesn't get met, the desire doesn't get fulfilled right now, which means you still have the need, you still have the feeling, you still have the emotion yelling at you. You just don't do anything. You wait until it's the right time. And when I do that, cultivate patience with myself, all of a sudden, strangest thing happened. Most of the feelings kind of dialed down and went away, and things became quiet. Because most of these emotions are they come up and they go back down. They come up and they go back down. But when you cultivate patience, and you actually are patient with yourself and with your life and with your needs and desires and so on, the weak voices that are just loud, they go away because they're weak. And what remains are the stronger voices, the deeper needs that don't go away so quickly because they're deeper under the surface. And that's kind of where, like, when you do that, let's say if and when I do that, to stay patient with myself, not listen to my I forgot what the word is, but when you have these little things that pop up right this second, when you don't listen to them right now, and you just wait, and then you start to listen to the deeper needs, the deeper voices, and then you go after those deeper things that don't go away so quickly, you start to behave in a way that from the outside looks very mature, because it is mature. It's what a mature person does, that they don't I forgot what the word is, but like they don't
React?
not react, but impulsive. That's the word, impulsive. They don't behave impulsively, right? They see the bigger picture, because you kind of imagine a mature adult with a child. The child wants things right now, but the mature adult says, wait, right? Like, don't eat now, you'll eat dinner later at 8 o'clock. don't play right now. You're going to go play with your friends later. So patience is a big part of this. That's kind of how a mature person behaves. They are patient with themselves. They're patient with their impulses. So yeah, I just realized I'm just starting to piece this together right now, how patience plays and like interacts with emotions. It's pretty important.
Yeah. And what's nice about it is also, or what's important is to acknowledge that there are certain things outside your control. So in the same way that a farmer would have to wait a certain period of time before harvest and taking the actions to make sure that the harvest is successful, like there are certain conditions or certain like variables within his control, and other variables you just have to wait it out. You have to wait, for the season to come, for the harvest to be ready. So knowing this, in the same way that when you go to a doctor, knowing that the doctor can only see one patient at a time, you're going to have to wait your turn. It makes no sense to say that I want to see the doctor right away, unless it's an emergency, in which case it does make sense. But otherwise, you need to accept the things outside your control and then handle them in the best way you can. But as you were talking about patience, I realized three distinctions, I would say, which is what impression do we set to others and how we handle our emotions, and then how best can we behave, okay, like doing the right thing, but also how does doing the right thing feel, like what's our experience of life when it comes to being mature, when it comes to handling our emotions. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to do the right things, okay, like handle situations in the best way and to give a positive impression on others in terms of handling situations like in the best way possible. But also at the same time, we're experiencing enormous amounts of stress and frustration internally. We want to be able to handle our emotions so that the experience itself becomes like we reduce the negativity, or like the sting of a negative emotion. We reduce it as much as possible, while also trying to experience as much joy and like sense of freedom, sense of lightness as we can.
Oh, wait, sorry, I missed the question part.
No, it wasn't a question. It's more of like just making a distinction between three things. So the impression we give to others, the way we behave, like the way we handle a situation, and then the way we feel about the situation. I actually experienced this a lot with event management. Like when you start planning for an event, it's very easy to get sucked into the stress and panic about everything that can go wrong. But then even if you pull off a successful event, you don't want event planning to feel that way. You want to be able to sort of sense the urgency of certain things, respond very quickly to things going wrong, and which they inevitably do. But to be able to actually enjoy the process, to be able to look back and say, okay, this is going great, and I'm actually enjoying the event rather than panicking about like what do people think and what's happening.
Yeah. The distinction that you made about basically how you behave and handle a situation more objectively, and how you feel inside as you handle, let's say, the responsibility with patience and maturity. And the third one was how it looks like from the outside, or how it looks like it feels.
What impression you give to others.
Right. So this thing is it's so significant. It's really, really significant. For a reason I'm going to talk about next, people tend to most people live with monkey see, monkey do. They just do what they see other people doing. But almost all the time, their impression of what that person is actually doing is completely inaccurate, not the same as what that person is actually experiencing and doing while they're giving you that impression. That's why things get morphed, and cultures and values tend to get morphed and distorted over time in generations, because for some reason, I think I'm going to address that next. When the wise person, the leader of a nation or something like that, does what they do and found the nation and create this culture, and they did something amazing, they don't, let's say, I don't know, like transfer their skills and their experience and how they handle things perfectly. They do it in a flawed way, which is, I think, is inevitable. I don't think there's any way around that. It can't be a perfect transference of skills. So people tend to end up, over time, the leaders die and the children grow and take their place. But the children that grow and take their place only have the impression left over. Maybe their writing, maybe the actions and deeds, maybe the laws and rules, maybe the values and cultures, and the habits and routines and the traditions. But all of that is an impression of the experience of the leader who founded all of this. And so the next generation tends to go by their impression, even though they think that impression is the reality of the experience. It's not. It's just an imprecise impression. It's precise enough to get you by and to make things not go too badly, but it's not perfect. And so the way I think, so I've observed this a long time ago. I thought about it a lot, and my way of making sense of it is that this is exactly why family values are so extremely important. And the way I see it personally is that the family structure or the family unit is really the how healthy the family unit in a society is. That's how healthy the society is. If the families are messed up and broken and twisted, there's so much problems and divorces all over the place, that will be reflected on the health of the society very rapidly. I was going to add also that, so the transference of these core skills, like not just like how to do something, but that experience of handling a situation maturely with patience, and handling it well, the way that gets transferred really, other than by how people see the person, is that person teaches it to their children. It's by that very, very close, intimate relationships that they get really well transferred, because there's such deep ideas and a deep integration of skills that you can't communicate that objectively quickly with a vast number of people. It's already too difficult to share that very intimately with someone you raise over decades, right? So that family unit is the best way of sharing and spreading those core skills, I believe, and teaching people how to be genuinely mature. But if that intimacy breaks, well, it doesn't get transferred. Nobody learns how to be mature. Everybody loses out on that, and everybody gets distorted. They get the wrong impression of what maturity means. And some people think it's being bossy and angry and authoritative or authoritarian all the time. So some people think it's being kind and not hurting anybody ever. So people tend to have these extreme views. Those extreme views would be corrected with this intimate connection with someone who's genuinely mature. But and I think the best way to have that is through the family dynamic, and through the family spreads outwardly to other families and to the rest of society. But without that, the best thing that we have, which is not too bad, it's pretty great still, is books. And now we have videos, which is fantastic. But for most of human history, it's been books. Up until our generation, it's been only books, mostly, except like TV, the previous couple of generations. But throughout most of history, other than that family structure, the only way to transfer that maturity and to teach it is through books. The other way that you would learn maturity is through your own experience, but that's difficult enough.
Yeah, lots of great points, and I do think it's important to have a role model to show us what maturity is like. I think many of us lack that kind of role model, and which is why we have like generational issues, because parents typically don't see what good parenting looks like, so they perpetuate the same problems that they experienced as children, or they might even like react in the opposite direction. So whatever they experienced as children, they don't want to pass down to their children. So if their parents were strict, then they become too lenient.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they become lenient, their children don't end up with a structure that they can use or a sense of maturity. Not like there's one thing to have maturity as social conformity, and then maturity as you don't need maturity, like the complete neglect of maturity.
Yeah.
Or like you have to listen to your emotions, like do as you feel, and that kind of sort of complete opposite. I think we're reaching the 1 hour mark, maybe.
Yep, almost, yeah.
Although I didn't feel it, like it felt like
yeah, me too, except I've been sort of watching the clock, but otherwise, yeah, it's been going smoothly. So to wrap this up, we all have different emotions and feelings. This summary is for those of you who stuck around till the end of the hour. So emotions and feelings, they tell you things. They tell you to do things also. But as Naval Ravikant wrote in a tweet, your feelings are not the facts. They're only an estimate of the facts. So they're not 100% accurate about the reality of things. But you do want to listen to them because they give you very valuable insight and information. So rationality is to listen to your emotions and your feelings, but not necessarily to do what they want you to do. So that means to sit with the feeling that you have and to allow yourself to feel it without necessarily trying to make it go away. It will leave when it feels heard. I'm stepping out the boundaries of the conversation that we just had, but rationality is very tightly connected with maturity. And what I got out of it is a stronger emphasis on the role of patience in both maturity and in turn rationality. So patience, I'm getting, this is what I'm getting out of the conversation, because this is where I personally am at in my life, that patience is the bridge to rationality. It's more importantly the bridge to maturity, to be patient with yourself, your needs and your desires. And then you, by being patient, you'll see what's genuinely important rather than being compulsive and impulsive. And when you see what's genuinely important, you behave in a way that seems mature to others, and in a way that's, let's say, more rational. Because I don't think there's anything as either rational or irrational. It's more like a spectrum of how rational you are. Could be wrong about that, but that's what I'm starting to believe. Haider, you tell me if I'm missing something here.
No, I think those are good points. We covered, I think, too much to summarize. Yeah, but usually my approach in life is, instead of saying either this or that, I think of it as, why not both? Or like, how can we get both to work together? So instead of rationality versus emotions, it's rationality
and
for some things and then emotions for other things. And there's there can be a healthy interaction between the two.
Oh, okay. This has been a good conversation. I can't believe I'm not going to have another one for at least a week.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah,
We'll be thinking in the meantime about these and other topics.
definitely. Definitely. All right. I'm going to end the session here. Thank you for this conversation, Haider.
My pleasure, always.